That first labor was just as difficult as anybody to convince, but as it went on and we started to put in the work, all the chips started to fall in line, and labor is like, oh crap, we got one of our own guys running here.
Are you on? Which side are you on?
Dan Osborn is a union steam fitter in Nebraska. He worked for Kellogg's for a long time prior to that and led a strike at the Omaha facility with BCTGM Local 50G in 2021, where they won a significant contract. You all know him, however, because he ran a historic campaign for U.S. Senate in his state as an independent and came pretty close to ousting longtime incumbent Republican Deb Fischer, with the final result being 53-46. Dan is back on the show now to talk about the campaign, lessons learned, and next steps. So, Dan Osborn, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and apparently politics now too.
Yes. Well, that's true, right? Like, because you didn't win, you're not going to be in office. And so like you're not going to have that power. But I do think that there really is something to being so close, especially as an independent, especially in a state as, kind of quote unquote ruby red as Nebraska is. And so that's why we wanted to talk, because I think that there are some things that people across the country who want to see more worker-focused politics and a more, worker-friendly government can learn from what you were able to do in Nebraska. And so before we talk about some of the lessons maybe that you learned and that you think folks can take away from your campaign, I'm curious, why did you decide to run initially? And then why did you decide to run as an independent?
Well, I'll answer the independent piece first because I've always been a registered independent from the time I could vote. I've never been able to put myself in a tiny little box, I suppose, as far as a red or blue box goes. But I haven't always been a political person. It wasn't until the strike at Kellogg's. For 20 years, I did nothing but pay my dues, work my way up in the union, clock in and fix machines every day, 8 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. But it wasn't until COVID, really, I suppose, would be the origin story. During COVID, we were working, there's 4 plants under the master contract, the umbrella of the master contract, and we were all working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, that whole entire year with no time off as deemed essential workers by the government. So, they made at one point in time, 50% of our workforce was forced quarantine and or sick, but they made record profits. They went from $19 billion to $21 billion. The CEO gave himself a $2 million raise. The board enriched themselves, the stockholders enriched themselves, and then our contract expired. For me as president, I figured it'd be a no-brainer that we were going to get a little sliver of the pie. But instead, they tried to take our health insurance. They tried to take our COLA, cost of living adjustment. They tried to implement a 2-tier wage system with no path for a lower tier employee to go to the upper tier. So, that was my old crap moment. There hadn't been a strike in Nebraska since 1972. So I had to learn what it all meant. And I figured it out. We kind of built the plane as we were flying it, similar to my campaign. But I knew Democrats were going to come out and support on the picket line because that's traditionally what they do. But that's not the way I see my world, Jacob. It's I didn't see black or white or men or women or Republican or Democrat on the picket line. I just saw people that wanted to go to work for a fair wage, decent benefits for the time that they trade in service of the company. So I set out to make it a nonpartisan issue. I was able to get a Republican House congressman out to the picket line. I was able to get our governor, now U.S. Senator Pete Riggets, to draft a letter and send it to the CEO, Steve Cahillane, imploring him to get our people back to work. So I was pretty effective in making it just a worker issue and not a partisan issue. So fast forward to, last year in October, we announced my candidacy running as an independent, and really just a lot of it was labor focused. It was worker focused. And I just realized how much corporations influence our elections in this country. We could talk about voter boxes and Russian meddling all day long, but truly it's the corporations that influence our elections, and that's what I set out to change. We came dang close, but I think I'm hoping what we created here in Nebraska is a spark that's going to light a fire nationally. I mean, a lot of people around the country took notice, and I think a lot of people are going to try to repeat what we did here.
Why did you choose the U.S. Senate to run? That is a pretty high office, and I mean, it obviously, you came really, really close and ran one of the most interesting and engaging, I think, campaigns for people who care about workers more than they care about Democrats or Republicans, right? I was more interested and engaged with your campaign than I was in any other campaign really across the country, frankly. But I have union members now that are talking to me about being interested in running for office potentially in 2026 somewhere, and they're kind of considering what office to go for, and I'm kind of nervous about them going for higher office because I feel I worry about encouraging them to take on a task that large. And so were you really confident when you made the decision to run for U.S. Senate? Like you already knew you had a base, or is this something that what was that decision-making process to run for U.S. Senate as opposed to maybe a lower office?
It really started with the railroaders out in North Platte. North Platte, Nebraska is the biggest rail yard in the world. And they were upset with Senator Fischer, my opponent, with her stance on rail. I mean, they had pictures of her getting off of corporate jets. Like, there's a U.S. senator shouldn't be getting off a UP corporate jet at any point in time. But she would consistently vote down the Rail Safety Act. She headed the transportation committee that allows railroads to police their own safety, and now they have death factored in as acceptable in a safety program. So that's who she is. So this really started with them, and they recruited me via the beautiful World Wide Web. I haven't had political aspirations, but they saw somebody in Deb Fischer who really just doesn't do anything, and quite frankly, the fact that she still won blows me away, because she's a extremely ineffective senator, but she's got an R next to her name in a very red state, and she basically beat me off of lies. She made up things about my stance on immigration and everything else, and people just bought it, I suppose, at the end of the day. But we saw a weak incumbent, and that's why we chose that office to go for, and that's where I wanted to make the most impact too. That's where I would have been the only one in the U.S. Senate with a union card in my wallet, and that means something to me. And yeah. I feel like just because we came so close, within inches, it just shows me people are ready. People are thirsty for a change, something different, and especially for workers to actually have a seat at the table finally.
Right. And so, what do you think some of the things that you learned, what are some of the things that you learned about the political process, about running for office, about running an effective campaign? What are some of the things that you feel like you learned during the campaign that maybe other folks don't know that they should?
Well, I think, we all hear about the corruption and how ridiculous it is, and that's all true. You can get on TV and say anything about anybody. There's no referees. There's nobody to call out the BS when people lie about you. It puts your family through the ringer. But we can't stop fighting. But also what I learned, I did over 180 publicly advertised events. I did rooms sometimes with 5 people and sometimes with 300 people. But what I learned, and especially running as an independent, I would get I would get both sides to my meetings, or my town halls, I suppose you could call them. And people would shuffle in, and I was in Columbus, Nebraska recently. I had about 80 people there, and half the people, people naturally segregate themselves. And I had the MAGA crowd on the right, and I had Harrison Walls on the left. And I gave my normal speech, and I said, look, I can see there's a division right here in this room. But here's the thing: we're all friends here, we're all neighbors here, we all, we live in the same town, and we all understand what the issues are. Let's focus on the issues and how to resolve them. And Republicans aren't the enemy, Democrats aren't the enemy here. We have to talk about who's dividing us and why. And after I said that, and then we focused on issues, there was no squabbling. Everybody was nodding their heads together. um, and so that's what I learned is we're not as divided once we start talking about the issues,
Mm,
as the media lets us on to believe.
right, right. How supportive was labor during the campaign? It sounds like labor was kind of a big part of you kind of getting involved in the campaign initially. So what did that look like throughout the campaign?
Yeah, it was a little difficult at first, because this was just like anything, just like Bill Gates starting out a company out of his garage. It was a complete startup from just an idea. And at first, labor was you know, just as difficult as anybody to convince. But as it went on and we started to put in the work and we started to fundraise, and our digital fundraising took off, and they started to see, oh, this guy's raising money, and he's getting out and talking to people. And then the first poll came out of the race that essentially had us within the margin of error, essentially tied with Fisher. Then everything started, all the chips started to fall in line, and labor was like, oh crap, we got one of our own guys running here, and this is a real thing. It took some convincing to for people to understand that this is real and possible. And once that became known, labor was very influential. Going to DC and talking to all the internationals and the nationals and the presidents and the political people. Everybody wanted to jump in and help. And Sean Fain came to Omaha and did a rally with me in Omaha and Lincoln. And I look forward to working with him in the future to see how we can get other, you mentioned other labor people running for offices. They all certainly don't have to be U.S. Senate. So we're starting a PAC called Working Class Heroes PAC, where I'm pretty good at fundraising. So we're gonna raise some money for that, and we're gonna help people get elected. So if you know anybody that's getting elected, you let me know, and hopefully I can donate to their campaign and help them get started too.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. All right. Yeah, we'll definitely, once these, 2026 is a little ways off, but, you need to start up these things pretty early. So once we're getting close to any final decisions with these union members in Alabama that are reaching out to me about running as an independent, I'll definitely be reaching out to you and making those connections. You mentioned that you were able to raise money. Talk us through that. I think as people who are, who are workers who care about, getting pro-worker politicians elected. Obviously, you're not going to be able to go to somebody like a Bill Gates and get millions of dollars spent on your behalf in a super PAC, right? You have to raise money from like workers and our organization. So how did that work?
Yeah, our average, we raised over $14 million after everything was said and done. And our average donation was $40. I had two volunteers in my office just opening envelopes with checks, 10, 20, 30, $40, with letters of encouragement. And, that was our biggest donation, because we wanted to be different. I feel like, my opponent, 4 of her top 11 donors are Class 1 railroads, and that's why she was so bad with workers on rail. She always sided with the corporations. She takes money from the meat packers in the state and does their bidding. So, that's why, these corporations are so influential in government, is they're the people who can afford to buy senators. You and I certainly can't. Um, so I didn't want to take their money. I didn't take any corporate PAC money. And, it was just all hustle. It was just all going on trips and going to the Independent National Convention in Denver. And it really wasn't until we got an article in the New York Times that helped boost us initially. So, it was all stepping stones on the ladder. Each time we got a USA Today article or a New York Times article, then our fundraising took off. And but yeah, mostly it was just sheer hustle and elbow grease.
How do you manage maintaining a base of support with different ideologies? That was something that I thought was interesting when I saw interviews with people that were supporting your campaign or articles about it. There were Republicans supporting you. There were Democrats supporting you. There were people on the left, like capital L left. There were people on the capital R right. There were libertarians, Greens, independents. Yeah, and that's like a lot of those people are really, really, have really different ideas about how to make the country better. So how do you manage maintaining that kind of coalition that might seem unwieldy to some?
Yeah, this is going to sound cheesy and cliche, but it's not red and blue for me. It's red, white, and blue. Just like my event in Columbus that I was talking about. It's you would drive around the state and you would see Osborn sign next to Trump signs, and literally across the street you'd see an Osborn sign next to a Harris sign. So if nothing else, I brought neighbors together because that's what I'm passionate about doing. I served in the United States Navy and the Nebraska Army National Guard. It's because I love this country, and I hate to see it seemingly being ripped apart. Not one side's to blame. Like I said, it's this division that's been created, and I think the division it's a story as old as time. Mao Zedong, The Art of War. You divide, you conquer. You got to ask yourself who's doing the dividing here, right? And it's I think the common enemy here is for the 55 multinational corporations that funnel their profits overseas, park it there, don't repatriate it back to the United States, and they don't pay any taxes. And and the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks of the world that are anti-union, and they don't want their workers to get a fair shake. Those are the ones who are benefiting from having us fight over transgender bathrooms or the Second Amendment. They'll have us fight over anything. It doesn't matter. And instead of being focused on workers' issues and health care for people and the environment, the real issues that we should be talking about. So for me, bringing everybody together was fairly easy because we just focused on issues and not party politics.
Right. Yeah. They'll have us fight over anything that doesn't affect their bottom line, right? There's a reason that and this is with both parties, right? There's a reason that it is so easy for Democrats to defend like transgender social issues, right? And that's because it doesn't affect the bottom dollar of any of their donors, right? And there's a reason that it's so easy that Republicans want to stoke this issue socially, because it doesn't affect their bottom line. We're not actually talking about increasing the quality of life. When we're talking about these kinds of things, we're not actually talking about increasing the material the quality of the material conditions that working people live under. We're not talking about taking some of the money that we create as workers from the people at the top of these corporations who are stealing it from us, right? And so there's a reason that these social issues are what both parties really want to focus on, rather than, some of those things that you were talking about that you really focused your campaign on. And so what were like the top three things, like your elevator pitch, when you went and talked to people, what were those things that you said that you were going to be working on?
Certainly, yeah, that's a good question. And certainly we don't see, I didn't hear a whole lot in presidential or vice presidential debate on what anybody's actual plan is to increase the national debt. You know, every single child that's born into this country is born with $100,000 in debt. That's unacceptable, and it's unsustainable as a country. We can't continue to do this. We have to get our manufacturing back into this country to create more jobs, and we did a pretty good job of that with the CHIP Act. But it's about bringing our jobs back here, keeping them here, incentivizing them to be here, and you know, tariffs. You know, we'll see, but I don't think they're going to work, because typically the tariff always comes back to the consumer, because the CEO is certainly always going to get theirs, and it usually always comes back to the consumer, and the farmers and ranchers get hurt. So we'll see what these tariffs do, if anything. But it's government spending. You know, for example, 60%, over 60% of our budget in this country is the Department of Defense. And I'm not suggesting we cut military spending at a time, you know, in a very tumultuous globe, but they've never passed an audit, ever, a federal audit. And they have trillions of dollars in unaccounted for assets, which they add billions to every year. That's wasteful spending. And then we can go down and talk about all the different departments and three-letter agencies that we need to trim the fat and figure out how to stop spending more money than we bring in. It's a simple equation, right? And I do it in my own home. I'm sure you do it in yours. And the second part of that economy/inflation is holding corporations accountable for inflating their prices. We saw Kroger admit to inflating some of their groceries upwards of 1,000%. It happened at Kellogg's. I was a mechanic there, and during the last gas crunch years ago, they announced they were going to raise the price of every one of their products by 25 cents to offset the price of shipping. Gas surplus charge, I suppose. Fair enough, right? I guess. But in the middle of winter, when nobody's driving anymore and gas prices fall back down, the quarter didn't come off. Certainly, it never comes off. What they did instead is had me and my maintenance team go and retrofit all of the packing equipment in the second biggest cold food manufacturing plant in the world to run smaller bags, put it in smaller cartons, and sell it to you for the same price. So, you know, I saw it firsthand, and there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be a level playing field. For example, Dollar General. I've driven through Nebraska. I don't know how prevalent it is in Alabama, but you go to every small town in Nebraska, and there's a Dollar General at the end or beginning where you're going in every town. And then you drive through Main Street and you see boarded up windows where mom and pop shops used to be, because they cannot buy the same goods Dollar General can for the same price. So there needs to be a level playing field there. You know, we shouldn't monopoly, and antitrust laws is certainly a big part of it. And Lisa Khan's doing good work, or Lena Khan, excuse me, is doing really good work with the FTC right now, but they need to continue to be stronger in breaking up monopolies, because without competition, there's nothing to drive down costs. And that bleeds into our healthcare system. You know, so many different facets of our lives. We could save money by breaking up monopolies. So that's one of the things I really wanted to get in there and fight.
Right, right. And so why do you think, you know, you mentioned at least one of the reasons, you know, you feel like the kind of corporate spending on behalf of Fischer in Nebraska was one of the things, but if you were to kind of, you know, assess, what do you think were some of the reasons that ultimately, even as close as it was, your race did come up short?
The border and immigration, you know, and it's crazy because, you know, Deb Fischer has been an incumbent for 12 years and she's done nothing on the border, but they love to use that as an issue to get reelected. We saw 2 border bills get shot down that would have provided 1,500 more agents. And, you know, the people really on the border, that want the agents the most are the agents themselves that are shorthanded. and it had given more technology and more money to secure our ports of entry. And then we need to reform our immigration system too. So, there's a 10-year backlog of asylum seekers. So what do you think they're going to do? They're just going to come over illegally because they can't do it illegally because the system's broken. So she lied and she said I wanted to give Social Security benefits to anybody that's in this country unlawfully. I've never said that. It's not true. Don't believe that. But they spent $10 million in ads painting me out to be somebody like that. And unfortunately, enough money was spent and enough people believed it at the end of the day. Couldn't get out and talk to all 1.2 million voters individually. So I think at the end of the day, that's how corrupt our politics are. You could get on TV and say anything about anybody, and there's no referee and there's no repercussion of doing so.
Right. Is there anything that, looking back now, that you would do differently, you think?
Yeah, I left it all out on the field. And then a lot of money started to come in at the end. But unfortunately, it was a day late and a dollar short. But no, I really can't think of anything. Maybe I would have tried to have a beefier field team, but we had 6 offices open across the state, and we had over 200 volunteers. So I can't really say I could have done anything too much different other than try to defend myself better from the attack ads.
Right. And so, I've alluded to this before, but there are union members in Alabama that are coming to me considering running for office as an independent. What would your advice be?
Just do what you do every day. Clock in and work your ass off. That's what you got to do, especially as an independent. But right now, we're seeing. I'll even go so far as to call it a movement right now. They're the fastest growing demographic of registering voters and people leaving their parties are going to being independent because people are fed up with what they're seeing. And so I think right now, especially in 2026, I think we're going to see a lot of independents stepping up at all levels of government. And so I would just say, find out what district you live in, and start by talking to either your steward or your business agent and letting them know, like, hey, look what they did in Nebraska. We need more people to run too, and I want to be a part of it. So that's where I would start. Get your union support, get some early money going, and then start building your team.
So what's next for Dan Osborn?
Well, I'm going back to work as a fitter right now, but we have plans. I live in a congressional district where I ran ahead of Harris by 25 points. I ran ahead of both the Republican and Democrat by like 14 points in my district. So there's a mayor race, there's a governor race, and there's a congressional race in the House coming up in 2026. And there's another Senate race too. Pete Ricketts. There was a special election. Pete Ricketts seats up in 2 years. So we're going to start talking about trying it again.
All right. I think that's a really, the fact that you're going back to work as a fitter right now, right? And I think that what we know for a fact that if Fischer had lost, she would not be going to work in a real job. She would be some sort of consultant or a lobbyist or something, right? Making millions of dollars per year. And so I think that really speaks to the difference between the two of you as people and the constituencies that you represent. You do not represent a constituency that can float you into a fancy, multi-million-dollar job when a race comes up short. And so I think that I think that is almost as good a reason to vote for you as any, because after it's over, if you don't get elected, you have to go back to work, and Deb Fischer wouldn't. Sure. So, Dan Osborn,
we are starting the Working Class Heroes Action Fund, though, to help other union members and hopefully veterans run as independent in their prospective states too. So I'll be staying busy after I get off work, making phone calls and trying to fundraise for that.
Well, there you go. Dan Osborn, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning. Is there anything else that you want to share before we let you go?
No, just, especially to all the stewards out there, just keep it up. Stay strong, because we're definitely stronger together. I saw it on the strike at Kellogg's. I saw the solidarity with all the unions in my race. So it's super important because we're definitely stronger together.
All right, appreciate it. Dan Osborn, independent in Nebraska, union steamfitter. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.